Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report Spotlight. Today's guest is Bill Holter. Bill is a financial writer and gold expert. He collaborates with Jim Sinclair on jsmindset.com, and I am very happy to have him back on the X22 Report Spotlight. Bill, welcome back to the Spotlight.
Happy to be back, Dave.
Hey, thanks for being here. Let's start off with what's going on out in Europe. We know that Deutsche Bank, looks like they put a Band-Aid fix on that bank for the time being, but we see in Italy, the Bank Monte dei Paschi and other Italian banks, well, we're running into some problems here. It looks like they need about 8 billion or so plus euros to help out the banks. And we are getting reports that, there might be some type of bank runs going on right now. I mean, what is your take on what's going on in Europe? Do you think this is going to spread? Do you think they'll be able to control this?
No, I don't think they're going to be able to control it, and I do think it will spread because the problems of the Italian banks are the problems of the banks worldwide. It's truly a solvency problem, and it's coming to the forefront because of a liquidity problem. The lack of solvency is being discovered because of the lack of liquidity. And as a matter of fact, just this morning, there's an article out that Italy is angered at the ECB because the ECB is suggesting that there is a bank run problem with the Italian banks. So that's obviously going to hurt their ability to try to recapitalize and get, like you said, the 8.8 billion euro shortfall. Think about it. Would you invest in Italian banks? I mean, that's what it amounts to is they're trying to recapitalize. They need investors, and short of investors, you'll see bail-ins.
So you do think that we're headed towards that bail-in type of scenario right now?
Yeah, that's why the bail-in legislation has been written for the last couple of years all over the world, is because they knew this was coming. I mean, this is not a big surprise. This was pretty much a mathematical certainty that they're going to have to bail in depositors in order to survive.
I mean, do you think these central banks are feeling pressure? Because, I mean, look what we had. We had the Brexit where they said, you know what, we don't want to be part of the central banking system. We had the Italian referendum. And then here in the United States, Trump was elected. So do you feel the central bankers are feeling pressure right now?
Oh, absolutely. And plus we've got the French vote coming up. And then later in next year, we've got the German vote coming up. And you can see the rise of populism. You can see the rise of nationalism. And that's simply because people are feeling the bad economy. People know that there's something wrong. And that something wrong are the policies that were put forth by the globalists. And it's being rejected. So with a French exit and who knows with Germany, I mean, you could see the European Union begin to dissolve.
Do you think the central bankers will let it get that far? Do you think they'll let these countries go? Because right now, if we look at England, the UK, they had the referendum, the Brexit referendum, but they haven't initiated Article 50 as of yet. Right.
You're asking if the central bankers will let it get that far. The central bankers can't control it. The central bankers' monetary policy got us, not just monetary policy, fiscal policy also, but monetary policy got the world to where it is now. And there is no monetary policy that's going to be able to change the mind of voters. The only way to change the mind of voters is to rig the voting machines. And I mean, the voters feel it. They know it. They sense it in their gut. They see it in their paycheck. They see it by the loss of jobs, etc. And monetary policy is not going to turn that around. If monetary policy could create nirvana, we would have had nirvana many, many years ago, and things would be perfect. They're not.
That is true. I wanted to get onto gold here, and we see gold around 1100. In the beginning of the year, gold was doing quite well. It was, 1300 plus. And ever since the midsummer or so, it's been dropping off. Why do you think that gold is going the opposite direction at this point?
First off, manipulation is no longer conspiracy theory. Manipulation is currency fact. You've had Deutsche Bank admit to manipulation in silver and gold. You've had, HSBC, UBS. You've had a bunch of banks admit to manipulation. So us crazy tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorists have been proven right. And we've said all along that paper contracts on the COMEX, paper contracts on the LBMA are being dumped wholesale in order to suppress and push the price down. And those paper contracts are not gold. There's no gold behind those contracts. We are seeing $20 to $40, $50 premiums of the cash Shanghai market over COMEX and LBMA. And I've said this many, many years ago that when the COMEX game ended, you would see a big spread between cash and physical. I'm sorry, the paper and the physical, and that would begin to widen. And it is, if you look at silver, it got to over a $2 spread. That's over 10%. So a spread of $2 on silver is more than enough to arbitrage. And that arbitrage is going to wipe out the inventories, the physical inventories. And that will spell the end.
Now, there are individuals like Harry Dent and Martin Armstrong, and I know you wrote a piece about Martin's prediction that gold will go below 1,000. Do you think it will ever get that bad, that gold will go below 1,000?
Yeah, you could see gold go to $10 offered, no bid in the paper markets. That's not gold. Physical gold, I don't think you'll see go below $1,000 an ounce. When you're trading real gold, and you got to understand there's a big difference between real gold in your hand and a contract. Contracts are made to be broken. I do want to mention, as far as you brought up Harry Dent and Martin Armstrong. First off, Martin Armstrong, before he got out of jail, wrote about manipulation. He was screaming bloody murder back in 2010 regarding silver. He also did a calculation that I've done several times before. He did a calculation of, and this was 2011, of U.S. debt versus the supposed gold, and I think he came up with a figure of $25,000 or $30,000 per ounce. He forecasted $5,000 gold and said that that's extremely conservative. He more recently wrote that once he got out of jail, he's been a gold basher ever since. And then this past year, he wrote that gold was devalued in the 1930s, and then went on and tried to explain why and how it was devalued. Well, that's just plain false. That's completely false. Gold was revalued 71% higher in 1934. Gold was the best place to have money during the Depression. In a true deflation, what you want is you want money and liquidity, and gold is both. As far as Harry Dent is concerned, and I've written a couple articles on the flaws in his thinking, Harry Dent claims that the dollar was the best place to have capital during the Depression. And that's false. The best place was gold. Back then, gold and dollars were interchangeable. Before 1934, you could go into a bank with $20.67 and you could walk out with 1 ounce. Or you could walk in with 1 ounce of gold, turn it in, and walk out with $20.67. They were interchangeable. They were one and the same until that peg, if you will, was broken. Gold was confiscated. It was revalued higher to $35. Gold, the flaw in Harry Dent's entire premise is that the dollar is money. The dollar is not money. Gold is money. The dollar was always a derivative of gold. Now it's the antithesis of gold. Dollars and gold are the opposite. And going one step further, as far as history is concerned, the best place to have had capital from 1929 to, call it the beginning of World War II, was in mining operations. Homestake mining was up over 1,000% during that period of time when everything else was down 70, 80, 90%. And the dividends they were paying by the end of the decade were more than what the stock was valued when you could have bought it at first in 1929. One other thing, just because people are feeling down and out about mining shares because they've been hit so hard since the election, just remember mining shares year to date are still up, call it 70, 75%. Mining shares, believe it or not, for 2017 have been the best performing sector, even though it doesn't feel like it. I mean, they've been crushed, and people from the election, they feel like they've been shot in the heart.
We had the Fed right now, since we're talking about gold, and I'm thinking back to 2015 going into 2016 when they raised the interest rates by 25 basis points in December. We saw gold shoot up and the market come down. They did the same exact thing this December. What do you see happening as we go into January for gold and the market? Do you see the same thing happening?
Well, I think ultimately gold and silver are going to all of a sudden be not available. Like I talked about before, the arbitrage factor of it. Gold has been going from west to east, and the Western inventories are not infinite. As far as the Fed raising rates, the Fed really had to raise rates because the markets forced them to raise rates. The Fed had to raise rates this year because market rates were up over 100 basis points. So the Fed follows. The Fed does not lead. If you look across the globe, everywhere, interest rates have gone up 100 basis points pretty much or more. This rise in interest rates is on top of the most leveraged economy and financial system in all of history. It's not only the most leverage of all time, but it's the leverage ratios are worse than they've ever been pretty much everywhere. And oddly, the country with the best debt to GDP ratio is Russia. If you look at the West, even if you look at China, debt to GDP has never been at these levels. And these higher interest rates are going to affect, they're already affecting housing, autos. You can see it. You can see the interest rates are already putting a squeeze on the real economy. And beneath the surface in the financial markets, there's very tight liquidity. And these higher rates are in the process of turning derivatives upside down because all derivatives have interest rates as an original premise, if you will. The interest rates are factored into derivatives when they're first created. So if you create a derivative and you're using the assumption of a quarter of a point or a half a point, and all of a sudden rates are 1% or 1.5% or what have you, it changes the dynamic of the entire derivative. So a lot of these derivatives are not even close to what they originally were meant to be or meant to look like.
So, I mean, the Fed raised the rates, and before they raised the rates, we saw it was taking effect. And I mean, there were problems in the housing market where the rate was rising, mortgage applications were declining, and sales, they just didn't exist during this whole period. And if the rates continually rise, we're going to see a breakdown of the real economy. And my question to you is, I mean, they know this is going to happen. They know if they raise the rates, this is going to happen. Why would they do it then?
Because they were forced to. If the Fed didn't raise interest rates, it didn't matter whether the Fed raised rates or didn't raise rates. The market raised rates. It doesn't matter what the Fed did or didn't do, mortgage rates went up. So if they didn't raise rates, they would look like fools. So they had to raise rates, but it was forced upon them by the market. And higher, you're right, higher interest rates are, you can see it. It's already crushing the real estate market. And think about what the real estate market is to the real economy, the jobs from the real estate market. And just go back to 2007, 2008. The real estate market can decimate the real economy and decimate financial markets pretty quickly. There's way more derivatives outstanding now than there were in 2007, 2008.
So let's talk about the economy. We see that prior to the elections, they brought the unemployment rate down to 4.9%. We know that was for the elections to say, hey, look how great the economy is doing. And then we saw GDP move up to 2.9%. After the election, we see GDP revised and it was brought up to 3.5%. Unemployment was brought down to 4.6%. And we see the stock market continually going up and up and up and up, making it look like everything is absolutely fantastic. What are they doing at this point? Why are they pushing this illusion? Because we know what the real economic data reports. There's nothing good about the economy right now. Why are they pushing so hard to make everyone believe that the economy is so fantastic right now?
It's all about legacy for Obama. I mean, the numbers, they held the system together. The numbers, the 4.9% unemployment rate, this latest GDP growth of 3.5% or whatever. Not one year did we have 3% growth. The growth numbers that they have put out over the years are clearly bogus. The unemployment numbers are clearly bogus. All you have to do is go to John Williams' shadow stats, and you can see what's really going on. We've been in, I wouldn't even say we ever recovered. I think what happened after 2008, 2009 is the economy bottomed, and we've been bouncing along the bottom all along. I don't think we've even taken out the activity levels that we had back in 2007, 2006. We've had, 8 years of, quote, recovery. Have you heard the word in the last 8 years? Expansion?
Never heard that.
The typical business cycle, when the business cycle was working before we got to debt saturation, and that's the reason we're no longer expanding, because there's too much debt and growth gets spurred by debt, but the incremental debt is not creating growth. But if you go back these last 8 years, there has been no expansion. There's been truly no recovery. What you saw was the economy, they arrested the decline and they were able to band-aid and keep the financial system together. And I think what you're going to see is, within the next couple of weeks, next couple of months, I think you're going to see some truth start to come out, and the curtain be pulled back, and the real picture of where we really are is ugly. And I've said all along, we are completely ripe, completely primed for a collapse in economic terms, in financial terms, in all terms.
So when you say the truth come out and the curtain pulled back, what do you mean by that?
Well, let's just stick on the economy. The economic numbers have been completely bogus. Like I said, just go to John Williams, he's a number crunching bean counter that doesn't take one side or the other. He just wants the real number. And the unemployment numbers, if they were calculated the way they were back in the 70s and 80s, would be upwards over 17%. So those are severe recessionary, if not depressionary numbers. And the growth numbers of, continually 1, 2, 2.5% or whatever, they've been continually flat to negative. And the way they rig those is by rigging the inflation number.
Do you think Trump already knows what the real economy is, or do you think?
Absolutely, he knows.
So he knows what's happening behind the scenes. He knows that.
He absolutely knows that he's being made captain of a plane with no fuel left. He knows this is going to go down. And I've said the second best thing, I think the best thing about Trump winning the election will be who and what his picks are for the Supreme Court. Beyond that, we are going to collapse. It's a mathematical certainty that the financial markets are going to collapse. And my thought process is at least we have someone leading the country who hopefully believes in the rule of law. I mean, had Hillary won or Obama be able to go another 4 years or whatever, you could see the rule of law going away. And the rule of law for the average person would have been steamrolled. And I mean, with Trump as president, it's still not going to be a rose garden. But at least I hope and I believe there will be some fairness and adherence to the laws that are on the books, and they will apply to everyone.
I mean, we're getting word from J.P. Morgan Chase and the central banks where they're warning that, if Trump puts his policies, his economic policies forward, we might see a turn in the market in 2017. Do you think this is going to be payback under Trump, saying, okay, listen, we didn't get what we wanted. He's not listening to us. So we're going to bring this down under him and blame him for all of this.
Well, that goes along with the theory Jim Sinclair put forth when he simply asked the question is, will the machine work for Donald Trump? Will the machine work for him? And I think the answer is no. I think they've stretched it as far as they can. They're not going to be able to hold it up one way or the other. So why not just pull the plug? And you got to understand, this big money that you're talking about is already positioning themselves short the market, probably short bonds, certainly short or long silver and gold. They're pre-positioning themselves now for the plug being pulled. They'll make money. They'll still make money as markets collapse.
Can Trump do anything to stop it? I mean, does he have anything in his arsenal, in his bag of tricks to stop what is coming?
What could one man, what could a president possibly have in a bag of tricks? I mean, you're talking about Mother Nature. You're talking about Mother Nature has been defied for years by a globe borrowing continually more and more capital to have a better and better standard of living, while being accommodated by central banks that printed money supply out of thin air. So no, I don't think there's anyone on the planet, there's not a policy on the planet that can fix what's wrong. The final result is going to be a reset. Now, whether that reset is man-made or whether it's made by Mother Nature, it's going to happen. You cannot have, you can't build a house without a foundation. And in order for the globe to have a financial system, an economic system going forward that grows and is fair, you're going to have the great flush. What's been done has got to be flushed. All the malinvestment has got to be flushed. Once it's flushed, then we can start anew. But we're going to have to start with some type of foundation. And that foundation, the foundation to an economy, the foundation to a financial system is the money itself. So somehow, some way, money is going to have to be, I shouldn't say money, but currencies are going to have to be attached by ratio, some sort of gold backing. You've got to have that foundation in order to have true and real, honest working financial markets and economies.
When we have this reset and we have this flush, will the dollar still be the reserve currency of the world, or are things going to change dramatically?
No, I think you can already see that the movement away from the dollar to settle trade. I mean, you can see Russia and China doing deals in rubles and yuan. The day of the petrodollar is over. The dollar being the reserve currency, the dollar was the reserve currency because we had the most gold. That's why we were the reserve currency. And at this point, I think if an audit was done, you'd find out we have almost no gold. So how could we be the reserve currency?
So will our currency be just a local currency then? I mean, Jim Rickards was out there saying that the SDR is going to be the new world currency. Do you agree with that?
It could be the SDR. It's hard to say. It could, you could have a basket, but whatever the world reserve currency does become will have some type of gold backing. It's got to be hooked to gold.
So how do you see this year playing out in 2017? Do you see this whole thing falling apart in the beginning of the year, the middle of the year? Where do you see it all going?
We should have fallen apart several years ago. And I mean, we had a false start last January and February. It looked like things were coming apart. As far as timing goes, your guess or anybody's guess is as good as mine. But mathematically, we've reached debt on a global basis. We've reached debt saturation, and the game's over. So it's a question of when. It's not if. It's going to happen. And I do suspect it will be this coming year in 2017. I think, like I said, I think there's going to be all kinds of truth that comes forward, and people are going to see for themselves that it's been a hologram. It's been a financial hologram. The standard of living has been way higher than it should have been, and that's because of debt.
So when you say our way of life was too high, what level are we coming down to then?
Oh, I think in the United States you could easily, I think the minimum standard of living drop will be 30%. And I think you could see easily a 50% drop or as much as 70% drop in our standard of living. We've lived way beyond our means for the last, 50, 60 years, as long as the country has run deficits. A deficit, when a country runs a deficit, it means they're living beyond their means by whatever that deficit is. So, do the math. We've lived so far beyond our means, it's unbelievable.
Bill, I want to thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again, how can people see your work?
You can go to jsmindset.com. I do one or two public articles a month, and I generally do a couple, sometimes three articles on our subscription side. and Jim and I do a weekly interview, a cross interview, and we interview the last individual that we did for the last one for the year was Ira Harris, which was a really good interview. And that's also on the subscription side of the site.
Bill, once again, thank you very much for being on the spotlight. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave.